You want to come up here? Come on.
Good morning, Commissioners, Chief Inspector General, Mr. T. Fank, Madam Secretary. If you could all start getting into positions so we can be prepared to start the board meeting in approximately 2 minutes. Members of the public, welcome. We'll be getting started in approximately 2 minutes. Thank you. Good morning. Today is Tuesday, July 21st, 2020. It is 9:30 a.m. This is a special meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning, Commissioner Decker. Commissioner Decker.
Here.
Commissioner Goldsmith absent. Commissioner Bonner.
Here.
Commissioner Sobroff.
Here.
And Commissioner Figueroa Villa absent. Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. Also present, we have the Chief of Police, the Executive Director, the Inspector General, and the City Attorney. Madam President.
Thank you very much. And as I previously noted, Commissioner Figueroa Villa continues to be on medical leave, and we certainly wish her well. Before we begin today, I'd just like to take a moment to recognize the passing of Congressman John Lewis and his many, many contributions to our nation. I know the city is flying flags at half-staff in his honor. His history has been reflected on by many, many individuals in the last few days. And I certainly know that I could never do his legacy justice. But as we, as a commission, reflect on police reform and this moment in our own history, I think it's important to also reflect on his life, what he achieved, and be guided by his passion, humanity, and humility as we proceed forward in the weeks and months ahead. And with that, I hope you all will join me in a brief moment of silence to honor the Congressman. Thank you all very much. As we begin today, I'd also like to recognize all the frontline workers who are working throughout our community, working very hard to try and keep us all safe and healthy. during this challenging pandemic that our city, our county, our state, and our nation and the world are facing. So I'd like to thank them all for their service. Moving to today's agenda. Our regular agenda consists of 5 items that I would broadly characterize as administrative in nature. There are 3 contracts, one with the Superior Court, one regarding unclaimed property, and one on security, and 2 items for the destruction of obsolete or duplicate records pursuant to the city's administrative code, section 12.5. We will be returning to more substantive matters, the next phase of reform measures in the weeks ahead. This week, we are catching up on some pending matters that fall generally, as I said, in the more administrative category. Following that, we'll have the chief's report, general public comment, and then we have 2 closed session items, and that is our agenda for today. So at this point, I'm going to turn to the regular agenda items. I'm going to call all of items 1A through E up. Commissioners, I know we have all had an opportunity to review these matters and ask questions, but at this point in time, it's appropriate if any of you have questions of the department, please unmute your microphone to indicate to me you'd like to speak, and I will turn it over to you, Commissioner Bonner. Thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. This is a question, I suppose, for the chief, if I could, and I'm referring to item 1A relative to the conversion of traffic citations. Just on the issue generally, I don't believe, or I'm not aware that the city council has taken up a motion that would look at the possibility of transferring some or all of the traffic enforcements along with some other functions. I know there was some discussion of that at one point in time, but I've not heard that there's been any more recent action on it. But if you could comment as to whether that's accurate, that there's nothing's happened, or has there been some discussion, informal or otherwise, along those lines?
Good morning, Commissioners. There is a motion before the City Council for the Department of Transportation, LAPD, to work together to identify what functions in regards to traffic enforcement, traffic investigations, collision investigations could be transferred from the department. That is the extent of the work to this point. I have spoken with the General Manager of the Department of Transportation. Our effort is to sit down together and understand what potential realignment of responsibilities would entail.
Has there been any timeline on any of those? I didn't notice any timeline on the prior motion relative to mental health and other functions. Has there been any particular timetable put onto that conversation one way or the other?
Just internally, my expectation is that we are going to move forth with exploring this and being prepared upon the council return into August, September. I would expect us to be in a position to start providing some feedback. There is for instance, in the area of traffic reports, I believe there is room and ample space for us to realign responsibilities. That will allow us to deal with the pending cutback of about 400 personnel in our staffing. And there's some 70,000 traffic collision reports. Many of them are very low level matters of with little or no investigative value. And I look forward to the opportunity of understanding what potential DOT could have, Department of Transportation, in that space or other areas as well.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I had, Madam Chair. Thank you.
I have,
Excuse me, just Commissioner Bonner, before we move on, that's for items A through E, is that correct?
Yes, that's all I had for items A through E.
Thank you. Commissioner Soboroff, sir.
I have a question on D. Usually it says obsolete or obsolete original and duplicates. I just want to make sure that we do have, even though we are destroying original and duplicates, that in both D and E, that there is another set of duplicates somewhere, so we're not destroying everything.
Commissioner, I'll take that as a question for me.
Sure.
Many of these have requisite copies or originals, such as search warrants with the underlying investigative packages. There are some that are originals that do not have backup copies, if you will, that are no longer any value, if you will. And this destruction process is described by the city administrative code and is compliant with it.
Okay.
Anything further, Commissioner
No,
Summerall?
no other questions for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief, if I could ask a few brief questions with respect to the item 1A on the contract with the Superior Court. As I read the contract, that would still be relevant even if many of these services were transitioned to the Department of Transportation, correct? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then also on the security services, my understanding is that this extension is so that a new RFP could be issued. And that is the matter that this commission previously discussed in terms of the contents of what would be in that RFP to update and modernize that particular contract. Is that correct as well?
Yes, this will allow additional time to conduct a competitive bid for these services.
All right, thank you. I don't have any further questions on items A through E. Commissioners, just final questions in case there was something else you wanted. Seeing no one unmuting their mic, Madam Secretary, please close public comment. How many people are in the queue for public comment, please?
Yes, we have 14 speakers.
14 speakers. Could you put the clock at 1 minute, please? And let's begin public comment on items A through E. Thank you.
Okay, first we have Michelle Fowl, followed by I Yield.
Hi, actually my public comment was going to be for item 2, so I can wait.
Okay,
Thank you. We'll move on then. Thank you.
so I Yield, followed by caller ending in 1248.
And please reset the time.
Hello,
Hi, you're on.
this is I Yield. I'm sorry, what am I allowed to comment on? Can I give general comments now, or is this just through item 1?
Item 1. So if you want
Okay.
general comment, you just raise your hand at either.
I have a comment on item 1.
Okay.
I think you should press pause on your property auction contract. I think that this is not the time to be dealing with it, but like in the middle of a housing crisis, and you're talking about people who are profiting off of unclaimed items that belong to unhoused people. I think you should pause. I think that who is deeming the records obsolete? Given Chief Moore's track record of lying and doing away with records, is it really a good move to accept his word that these things are compliant with code? What documents are being deleted? I don't think that that's a very good move, as far as if you guys are an oversight commission and you're just like asking Chief Moore, hey, does this comply with code? Oh yeah, it does. Okay, cool. Because also when Melly Corrado was murdered, that seemed to comply with code too. And we'll talk about that later during general comments. But you guys just ask him and he says, okay, and then you move on. What are the documents that don't have?
Thank you. Next speaker, we have caller ending in 1248, followed by Zach Sherwin.
Hi, I actually want to give general public comment, so can I be called upon again when it's time for that, please?
Yes, but please raise your hand to indicate at that time. But I'll make a note. 1248. I'll make a note for general comment.
Thank you so much.
Please move on, Madam Secretary.
Okay. So we have Zach Sherwin, followed by caller ending in 3146.
Yeah, hi. I just want to say, sort of administratively here, there's this thing happening at these meetings where we're getting all these agenda items presented in bulk. And I think there should be an opportunity for people to speak to these matters individually. Each of these is its own set of considerations, and a minute isn't really long enough to give the kind of response that people want to give in the first place. And so grouping it up like this, I think just contributes to an appearance and a feeling of a lack of transparency on your part, which, as you can hear from speaker after speaker on these meetings, is something that's really going on right now. I also want to say that what's being called for by the community is a defunding of the LAPD, So seeing these multi-year contracts on the agenda, that's not really consistent with the long-term vision of what people in this city are looking for. And I urge you not to approve these kinds of lengthy contracts. That concludes my remarks.
Okay, thank you. Caller ending in 3146, followed by caller ending in 8921.
Hi, Jonathan Foster. It just seemed possibly, I guess, is the court charging the police more when they having a budget issue? I hope that that's not what's taking place. I had 192 pages. I did try to read most of it. And I hope that that's not the case, as they're taking money away from the police department, which, you know, I don't necessarily, I'm for not shooting people that are unarmed, but I'm not for taking the police money away. But everybody has an opinion. And of course, the governor, or the mayor of the toilet, did take the money away at a time when we don't need it. So maybe you guys are charging more, or the court's charging more. I couldn't find out. But it does look suspicious that the court would be charging more. I hope that's not the case. And I'd like to say hats off to all the dead police officers since the end of May. It's unconscionable that this is taking place. I hope there's a march that nobody is going to commit crime. Where is that march?
Thank you. Caller ending in 8921, followed by caller ending in 8755. Caller 8921, you're on.
Good morning. I'm actually here to state public comment. Can I come back?
Yes, please raise your virtual hand at that time, but I'll make a note that 8921 would like to come back as well. Please move on, Madam Secretary.
Caller ending in 8755, followed by MW.
Hi, I'd also like to return to general comment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll make a note for other individuals in queue. If that's your intent, just lower your hands for right now, or when we call on you, let us know. Thank you.
MW, followed by Kim Isaacs.
Yes, you started this morning honoring the brave and sacrificial leader, John Lewis, who was jailed over 40 times by corrupt officers like the ones you oversee here, on the 2-year anniversary of the murder of Meli Corrado. And selling off public property during a pandemic is abhorrent. It should be paused. It should be done to keep Angelenos in their homes and property protected, not to give more funds to the LAPD. You know, in psychology, there is a term known as the dark triad. It refers to the personality traits of narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. They are called dark because of their malevolent qualities. Do you know what allows these to continue? Enablers. Body like yourself who allow for evil to continue when you have an opportunity to be brave, to truly honor the legacy of John Lewis.
Okay, thank you. Ken Bernard, followed by Adam Smith.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo some of the previous callers. How the agenda is put together is obviously confusing for people here that want to be involved in their local government. So I would just suggest that you look at that. Limiting people to different comments at different times on different themes doesn't make a lot of sense, especially when the majority of the callers here and the people in the city are asking for a defunding of the police in general. So while you're talking about the sort of nuts and bolts and the nuances of all these different things, you're really missing the larger picture here, and that people want a reimagined public safety in this city that would involve also firing Chief Moore. And I'm very sorry if that comment went off of the agenda here, but to me, that was in policy, the same as the LAPD found the murder of Meli Corrado in policy.
Thank you. Adam Smith, followed by caller ending 3892.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, just to like lift up kind of what Zach and others have said. The fact that we're supposed to speak on 5 agenda items in 1 minute truly shows your disdain for community input from the community that you're purported to represent, Ms. Decker. I do think it's worth people being able to come once a week and speak to whatever the fuck they want for these items. Like 1B, it's not just about selling people stuff. Where do the police get that stuff from? Last week you talked about LAPD not adhering to using the CalGang database anymore because they falsify evidence and call people gang members when they're not. They get this property, they steal it from people that they engage with, people that they arrest. So this isn't just about like CalGang, the use of CalGang database. This is about people being falsely arrested and their shit being stolen and sold for profit. That's bullshit, and we should be able to speak more than 60 fucking seconds.
Thank you. Caller ending 3892, followed by Paul Hennessy.
Hi, this is Eric Chevron. I'm going to use my minute really quickly. Chief Moore, please, you must resign. Lying to the Corrado family by telling that he would do everything within his power to get them the information they wanted about Melly's murder, but placing her autopsy on a security hold for 1 whole year. How inhumane. Failing to fire the officers responsible for her murder and is therefore complicit in her murder. Lying to the LA Times about the fact that it was actually an LAPD bullet that murdered Melly by telling them that it was the suspect, Gene Atkins, who killed her. Also, do people know that Gene Atkins is being charged for the murder of Melly? Gene Atkins is severely mentally ill, and he is being charged for the murder. LAPD is doing that to him.
We're going to move on because the speaker refuses to speak on the item on the agenda. Should that speaker still be here for general public comment, we can add it there. Move on to the next speaker, please.
Okay, we have Paul Hennessy, followed by Matthew Pardue.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
I'm just calling to state my opposition with the destruction of any records. Nothing original should be considered obsolete, especially now when you're attempting to be more transparent. I think the phrase obsolete original is too vague and can be easily taken advantage of. I also don't agree with the auctioning of unclaimed public property, especially during this time when people are losing their houses. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have Matthew Pardue, followed by our final speaker, Heather C.
Hi there. I'm going to go ahead and echo what Paul just had to say about the public records. Yeah, who's determining what's obsolete? I certainly wouldn't be taking Chief Moore's word on what's obsolete. No original document should be gotten rid of, I don't think. There should be a more thorough look into that and a better definition as to what is obsolete, what's being gotten rid of. As for the public property that's going to be auctioned off, you know, it's a really good point as to like, how does the city have this property? They seize it from people. That doesn't seem like the best thing to continue this contract, in my opinion, right now. I'll hop off for now and be back for general public comment.
Okay, thank you. And our final speaker, Heather C.
Can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Thank you. I have no problem with the destruction of the records and as well as the sale of the property.
Is that it, ma'am?
Yes, that's it. I'd also like public comment as well, if you can fit me in.
Sure, if you could also remember to raise your hand at that time, but I am going to make a note. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes public comment at this time. Commissioners, are there any questions? Chief, I would ask with respect to the approval of the contract relating to abandoned property, I would ask that the department work with Commissioner Goldsmith, whose committee is in this community engagement and homelessness issues, to ensure that the property that is actually moving forward under the contract and considered abandoned, that we all agree on what that definition is. If your team could kindly work with her, I would appreciate it to try to address that issue. Are there any other comments from commissioners before we move on to vote? I see shaking of heads. So let me begin with item 1A, which is requested to approve the department's report and transmit to the mayor. I will make such a motion. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Soberoff. I see his hand raised. And if you could unmute your microphones at this time so we can get a good record of this, I'd appreciate it. There we go.
Second.
Second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None. It passes 3-0. With respect to regular agenda item 1B, the contract between the City of Los Angeles and propertyroom.com. The request is to approve the report and transmit to the mayor. I will move that forward. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? None. It passes 3-0. With respect to 1C, regarding the amended Sixth Amendment contract with the ASSI Security Inc. Again, the requested action is approve the report, transmit to the mayor. I will move that. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please state aye.
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 None. It passes 3-0. With respect to the item 1D, the destruction of obsolete records pursuant to the city administrative code, I will move it forward to approve the department's report and transmit to the city clerk records management officer. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes 3-0. And with respect to item 1E, the motion I will make is to approve the department's report and transmit to the city clerk records management officer. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None. It passes 3-0. We'll move on then to the chief of police report. Chief.
Morning, Chief.
Good morning, everyone. Regarding significant activities over this past week, there were no categorical uses of force. I did publish we did publish a critical incident video relative to an arrest and dealing with some protesters that came upon officers in the central area. That was posted on Sunday. While the circumstances of the use of force and the arrest did not meet a categorical use of force definition, I did feel that on the basis of the number of public inquiries and the fact that there was some partial video of the encounter, that it warranted a broader release of body-worn video and other information that stemmed from that encounter. This past week, I also did a number of outreach efforts with a number of our media representatives, including an interview with KPCC, as well as a meeting with the editorial board of the LA Times, where we spoke about various matters of police reform, the department's budget, and the path forward for the organization, as well as recent events involving civil unrest and the department's response, and as well as the move forward and looking back and understanding the facts and circumstances of what led up to, in the midst of, and followed the civil unrest that we saw here in Los Angeles. Additionally, I attended a new civilian employee orientation, as well as a couple hours spent with our Metropolitan Division officers, answering questions and addressing their concerns relative to department operations, the path in regards to budget, as well as pending matters of police reform and potential how the department will be dealing with the reduction in workforce as we move through this year to ensure that our frontline operations, our officers working the field, building relationships in our communities, is protected and properly staffed. In regards to the crime, this past week has continued a bit of an emerging trend where we've seen an increase this last 4 weeks over the previous 4 weeks in the number of homicides as well as shooting violence. And while overall violent crime is down in the city 6.5%, that's more than 1,000 fewer victims of violent crimes, we have seen the month of July as a difficult month in regards to the number of homicides. This year, we've had 157 homicides versus 138 from the same period last year, which is a 13.8% increase. We've also seen a reduction in the we had during the COVID pandemic, the initial months of it, we had seen a reduction in shooting violence for the number of shooting victims. That gap now has shrank quite a bit. Now we have about 19 fewer shooting victims, and that's a direct result of an increase in shooting violence that we saw in the last 4 weeks. In the last 4 weeks, as a waterline, 115 individuals in the city of Los Angeles were shot in a 28-day period. The previous period was 102, and our goal is about 76. So these are increased levels. The concentration of the shooting violence has been in the South Los Angeles area, as well as some increase in the central and a smaller, much more isolated instance in the foothill area of the San Fernando Valley. The western part of the city has actually seen an overall reduction in both violent and property crime. We are continuing to monitor this closely. The nature of the shooting violence and homicides involves both instances in which we see conflicts in the street involving individuals we believe to be involved with gangs, as well as just internal, as well as just violence of disagreements and altercations in a street setting, and then to a lesser degree, some violence inside of homes and relationship directed. So no clear trend. We are also looking at this in regards to the issues of the pandemic and what nature of this violence may have an interplay, as well as the economic circumstances of the significant increase in loss of livelihoods and employment and housing, and what is the economic uncertainty of this pandemic? How might it also be an influencer on this? So I don't have a more definitive issue. We are in our weekly crime control and our weekly CompStat meetings, inquiring of our command officers, asking questions such as this. And then also we're working with our gang reduction youth development providers, Miss Ann Trimbley from the mayor's office and others, to understand from the interventionists and prevention ambassadors and workers that are in our community, what are they seeing and hearing as to this increase in violent crime, this recent uptick, and what might be our ability to disable that or disrupt it. We are in a summer in which Summer Night Lights, a program that we have become reliant upon as a manner of safe gatherings throughout city parks, throughout the city, has proven to be, in my view, an absolute influencer in reducing instances of turmoil and conflict in neighborhoods and promoting peace and a safe and supportive environment for our youth as well as families. And this year, of course, with the pandemic, our inability to have that program. While we do have this Summer Night Lights program in a sense of a food distribution network, the abilities beyond that is severely hampered. So how the dynamics of this pandemic that we find ourselves in is influencing our crime and our violence is an area that we will continue to pay close attention to. Lastly, we have seen a continued reduction in child abuse and spousal abuse numbers of reports. Year to date, as of this past Saturday, we have just under 8,000 child and spousal abuse Part 1 and Part 2 crimes. That's nearly a 9% reduction from the year before. And over a 2-year period, that's nearly a 12% reduction. So we are also concerned that in the absence of schools and safe settings, is whether our survivors of family violence and those that may be suffering from family violence, how are we reaching out and engaging and safeguarding their lives? So these are some of the underlying influences on our overall crime picture and areas that we'll continue to work on. The bi-weekly engagement with Detective Bureau, Deputy Chief Chris Pitcher, and the domestic violence advocates and child advocates continue, and our awareness with how sheltering and outreach and engagement messaging is occurring is present. So it's not without effort that we're trying to communicate this message that there are safe spaces, there are safe locations, and there are resources available for those experiencing family violence. And we stand ready to be supportive and to provide those safeguards. But I am concerned in the absence of again, schools, preschools, other activities that would have third parties that would normally or otherwise step forward to identify suspected child abuse reports. that those opportunities are lacking at this moment. Moving over to traffic, we continue to see reductions, double-digit reductions in serious injuries as well as fatal collisions. Overall traffic collisions, reported traffic collisions in the city of Los Angeles are now approaching a 25% reduction. That's 22,000 reported traffic collisions this year versus 29,000 last year. And that nearly 25% reduction holds over the last 4 years. In regards to DUI-related collisions, we also see a 13% reduction in total DUI-related traffic collisions, with a 38% reduction in the number of serious injuries. And effectively, we've also lost 11 fatal DUI collisions this year. That number last year was 11. It is a 31% reduction from 2016. That number was 16. Hit and run collisions are also down overall, as well as the serious injuries and death collisions, as well as our motor vehicle versus peds, as well as cycling. So there is I do believe that's an attribute of the COVID pandemic and the lack of traffic movement and traffic flow about the city, given the severe economic impact that this has had on businesses and the restriction to essential activities. Regarding our personnel numbers, we stand at 9,974. July did not have a new recruit class. This is part of our reduced hiring that will occur this fiscal year, in place of hiring what would typically be required of 500 personnel to maintain our sworn staffing at 10,000. We are now going to be hiring about 250 is our projection, which involves a class every 60 to 75 days. And that will allow us over the course of this next year to hire about 250, which will by June of next year, 21, will reduce our overall staffing to 9,750 personnel. On our civilian side, we're at 3,042. And while I welcomed the latest group of new civilian employees, we will see a reduction of 140 to 150 of our civilian personnel over the next series of months, where that number of our civilian staffing will fall to about 2,850 personnel by June of 2021. Our reserve officers, there's currently a reserve class that is ongoing, and that number stands at 395. And our cadets, which are suspended given the COVID pandemic, stand at 1,724. And that concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions or take comments.
Sorry, excuse me on that delay. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Bonner, I see your mic is open. Please.
Thank you. Chief, I first wanted to go back to the first item on the, or at least the item on the agenda relative to the mayor's directive that we've talked a little bit about the last couple of meetings. And I understand that there's a process underway. The mayor's office is working on some sort of template or something that will be shared with departments that'll be feeding into their racial equity plans. But I wanted to understand a couple of things in terms of the approach right now. Particularly since the protest and the uprising, there's been a number of organizations, both public and private, that have been coming out expressing commitments to work towards racial equity. And in a number of those organizations, some fairly basic things that at least are moving in that direction. One is like, an explicit commitment to work toward racial equity. And then some other organizational efforts to start with the workforce and trying to make sure you have an environment that's conducive to simply talking about race and initiatives that may be warranted to improve things. And then also assessing, starting a conversation about how to critically assess certain policy and procedures and things that may be yielding inequalities that need to be addressed. Question is any of that activity going on as we speak now in the department, or is there a deference right now to the process that's taking place in the mayor's office?
So the framework, it's my understanding, was received from the mayor's office, I believe, last Friday, so that the various departments, there were 35 departments across the city, the mayor's office rightfully attempted to have a framework so that each of the department heads, general managers would give them something that would be more easily able to be correlated and understood. So that was received by us, and now my staff is working with filling that out. And the attributes you've just called out is what I would expect us to include in it. The outreach and engagement of, for instance, on the recruitment and our efforts to build diversity, particularly in African American recruits, will be an engagement as we have earlier had going on with marketing firms that are active in that space, with that to those demographics, as well as looking at how our engagement with the recruitment process can be ensure that it's a level playing field, and that we are not having artificial barriers or obstacles to, particularly in the African American community, to the recruitment and also the retention of those individuals.
Well, I would encourage you. I mean, and as you should know, I think from the comments the last few weeks, I see all these issues related in the sense that the effort to recruit, whether it's African Americans or other officers of color, I think is going to be increasingly difficult, absent some some further developments in the conversation that is trying to take hold, I guess is one way to say it. And part of that includes people having a real sense as to what the culture and ethic and commitment of the police department really is in this regard. And that's why what I'm urging you each week to do is to not wait for the bureaucratic form and the template and the process and all that's coming out of the mayor's office, but to take the opportunity to proactively, show high commitment in this area by doing some of this very basic, simple things I'm alluding to here, absent some forms, coming out from the mayor's office. So
I'm sorry. Yeah. I don't mean to be misunderstood.
Okay, but let me just finish here, please. So I'm just asking you to reflect on that, and maybe if you're about to clarify that that's not the posture you're in. So please give me some hope.
Well, I hope to give you hope every day, Commissioner. The reality of this is that we want our report that comes back before this commission that goes to the mayor's office to be comprehensive, to be aggressive, and to address this critical issue. But it is not a starting point for us on racial equality and in LAPD. We have not started in this month or last month on our efforts to ensure that our organization, internally and externally, goes about with identifying the dignity of each individual we serve, is made up of people who have respect for all communities in Los Angeles, and are made up of from all communities in Los Angeles. And our processes, whether it be recruitment, retention, development, even matters of discipline, that those are all matters that recognize that inequalities can exist in a system, can exist within an organization, within a society. And how do we identify those and ensure that that we are removing those systemic challenges, and whenever it's individual based, that there's also in addition to development and retention of individuals, that there are consequences for those that engage in unfair practices or somehow have biases in regards to how they go about their work, whether it be as a partner, as a supervisor, or anyone in this organization. So please, I'm looking on this area here to give you a report, but it is by no means our reliance upon the mayor's office to fulfill our responsibilities in regards to racial equity in our operation, and nor do I think for a moment that myself or others before me in this last decade plus have been on our heels on this.
Well, I appreciate.
Last one, I'm sorry if I might. I look forward to meeting I've directed my staff to sit down with you specifically with your interest on this, to ensure that the report that we do generate is expansive in the areas that you are particularly concerned about. But again, this is not a matter that we're taking lightly, but it also is a matter that I think deserves a more detailed conversation that perhaps my remarks here don't support.
I appreciate that. And I would say a couple things. One is you alluded to also some retention efforts, and I did want to make sure that the conversation includes not only the effort to attract new officers, but also to make sure that we're addressing the interests of those who are currently wearing uniform and in the department, and I think are a part of this equation as well. And then I'd also say that I appreciate, and I will continue to take up the offer to understand more deeply myself. Although the way that this really needs to work and is for everybody to embrace the commitment. So it should be viewed as something that's a special interest to me as the Black Commissioner, and I'm not suggesting only that that's what you're implying, but I just want to make sure we're clear that really the effort is to make sure that everybody is bought into the vision, the values, the ethic, and the effort, and not to have it seen as something that's a niche issue that's of interest to any given particular based on their ethnicity. So I just I'm asking, and I continue to ask in the public setting for the benefit of making sure that it's something that does have that shared vision and ownership of the commission and other stakeholders, including yourself, Chief, and others, and not simply viewed as something of interest to me personally. So I appreciate that, and I'll look forward to the conversation on that. The second issue I wanted to ask you about was you mentioned the sit down with the editorial board, and I read a little bit about that in the paper, in particular relative to the thoughts or suggestions you had about reforming the discipline process. I think that would have the buck stop with you relative to officer discipline. And I wanted to, I think I've asked before, and I believe, or I sure hope that we are planning to at some point have a discussion more directly on the discipline process so that we can all understand, which is a very, very cumbersome and complicated and opaque process. And I think by design, and I'm not saying that nefariously, I think it's a difficult area for a lot of reasons. But nonetheless, can you just confirm, just comment on a couple of things relative to that process? That one, I believe that every one of these disciplinary actions begins with the initiation of a complaint, as a personnel complaint. And so I want to understand that. And then that, of course, sets in place what appears to be a very lengthy investigation process. So the question kind of is, how many of these, complaints do we know, like how many are pending at any given time, and also what is the average length of those investigations? When I think about it myself and talk with people, I think of them as taking a year or more in many cases to investigate. But if you could comment on, generally speaking, the number of I know there's no steady number at any given point in time, but generally speaking,
Sure.
how much are pending at any time, how much time do they take to resolve, and why, what's behind the length of the resolution process, and how would the proposal that was referenced in your comments with the editorial board, would it do anything to either simplify or expedite that process, or does it simply speak to the question of who has the final decision?
So my remarks with the editorial board dealt with particularly the most severe cases of discipline, which involved my recommendation for the officer's removal, which by charter authority is limited to my recommendation that goes to this internal tribunal, and then the consequences of that tribunal and its impingement on my authority as chief, because I cannot overrule that board if that board finds the person guilty, but determines a lesser penalty. And so in the last year, out of the 3,700 complaints plus 3,741 complaints, there were 524 officers that were disciplined. And in that engagement, there were 26 directed boards of rights, which is the most severe. Again, it's a consequence of preponderance of evidence supports that the allegations were true. And if proven true, those allegations warrant, in my view, my recommendation, the removal of the officer of his position or their position. Last year, of those 26 directed boards, 17 were found guilty by this board, a panel, and were moved. 7 however, were found guilty, but a lesser penalty. It's that 7 that I'm looking at, and that's not unique to last year. This year, we have had 5 directed boards. 3 of them, the individual has been terminated, and 2 were found guilty with lesser penalties. But let me go to your underlying another question you had, which is over the course of a complaint investigation. By statute, we have 1 year from date of discovery to complete administrative investigation. Year to date, we've issued 1,884 complaint investigations in the first 6 months of the year. 1,604 investigations have been closed. The chain of command investigations, those that are investigated locally, those involve lesser levels of misconduct. There's a 5-month statute, meaning it's a 5-month goal for those investigations to be initiated and resolved within 5 months as a means of ensuring that the officer, as well as the organization, has the outcome of that complaint and knows whether or not, and not something that's lasting over the officer's, hanging over the officer's head, or the organization being unable to resolve whether or not the alleged misconduct occurred. We track on the compliance levels by each of the commands across the city for that 5-month chain of command investigation compliance rate. I don't have that number directly in front of me, but I do know in the last 3 months, it's been an area of focus for us. We have what's called a 4-month notice that comes out that tells people where the statute of these internal chain of command complaints are within a 4-month period. And the idea is to meet the 5-month goal. So our efforts within the organization is to investigate all complaints fully, completely, with integrity, and also and a matter of timeliness is important so that the officer and the organization can identify and resolve whether the allegations were true, as well as identify what discipline, if any, and lastly, what systematic changes or other organizational impacts does this misconduct or these complaints identify. I do think that, and I look forward to calendaring with the board a broader discussion of this through Deputy Chief Marino that can talk about the entire disciplinary system. But what got a lot of attention from the editorial board was this remark about transitioning away from the existing Board of Rights process, which is unique to Los Angeles, and that the chief of police, which many agencies as the CEO determines whether the person is to be fired based on the evidence. And then a review process exists in nearly all instances, but that review process is outside the chief's control, or outside the chief's authority, or outside the organization, if you will. And I think that there's a lot of work to be done here. I would point out as a reminder that of the 8 initiatives that the Board of Police Commissioners identified in June, one of them was supporting meaningful reformative legislation, which is including advocating for potential changes to the charter regarding the discipline of officers. And that speaks to this issue. I think there's much more work to be done. It's premature to really talk about anything other than blue sky and what some of the driving factors as to my position and frankly my predecessor's desires to see a reform. I met yesterday with Craig Lally, the president of the Police Protective League. Obviously, the rank and file are very were alerted by this and are very concerned, and I share with them the importance of ensuring fairness, ensuring that officers and all personnel are given due process, and that that no one has the ultimate or arbitrary authority in such an important area of matters such as discipline.
Well, I appreciate that. A couple questions and an observation. The question is just of the 3,700, just the broadest number that you do you know, like, or do we know how many of those involve use of force?
There were, I believe, 100 that were over that period. I'm sorry, just give me a moment. The complaints on that, the form I have in front of me does not break down by types. There are at the individual command level, we do break down natures of complaints. I'll have to get back to you as far as what the percentage of that was. Okay, and then on the timetables that you mentioned, generally speaking, and maybe it's not possible to generalize, but I'm going to ask you to try to generalize in terms of the length of time that occurs.
is it, investigation? What is it that typically is the most time intensive part of the process?
The investigation and the adjudication, those two aspects. The investigation is a matter of organizing interviews and scheduling, and depending on whether it's a complaint involves one individual member of the public and say the actions of two officers, or it involves an arrest involving a pair of 3 or 4 units, as well as 2 or 3 or 4 witnesses. This is a bit of an accordion. These investigations can be very, very succinct and very short, one-on-one, matter relatively handled quickly, and then others can become quite expansive, involving a multitude of officers as well as a number of civilian witnesses. So the management of that is something that areas as well as Professional Standards Bureau sits down and meets with investigators to understand the investigative plan, and then what are the factors that are impeding that or that may slow it. We do work on the schedule of this is we try to arrange where officers are interviewed during their typical work shift, during typical days in which they're working. And so a series of days off, vacations, other unavailability can impact and slow or delay the timeliness of us getting this done quickly.
Well, thank you. I would just say that the greater understanding of the process, I think, is critically important, namely because there's a lot of, number one, you have the current desire and expectation for quick, swift, and immediate justice or accountability in the face of a particular incident. So you have that. I think the goal and the challenge of meeting that where it's possible, but also at least calibrating, helping people understand what that expectation could be. But the other is that there's all these various proposals for fixing or adjusting or in some way changing the process, not just what you just described relative to the chief, but others that have been described as well. And certainly speaking for myself, I don't know that I've seen a good presentation that really describes the process from beginning to end, and to understand where the choke points and bottlenecks and the traps and everything else are in the process. So the more people can understand it, the more capable everybody is really in developing thoughts about how it can be improved. So I just underscore that importance of us getting our minds around how to bring that level of transparency. And lastly, I'd say that I think one of the other goals is going to be to make the entire process more transparent through to the public. We've talked a little bit before about there's various pieces of information that's presented in different parts of the website that relate to different parts of this, but hopefully through this other conversation that we can figure out a more effective way to put the entire thing out in a more transparent way. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonner. I know you want to speak, Commissioner Soboroff. Before I turn the mic over to you, let me just ask Mr. Tiefenk. Mr. Tiefenk, I'd like to have scheduled sometime in the August, early September timeframe, a special public meeting that will, with the goal of describing the current discipline process, both to commissioners and the public. I think that would be in order. It can be a confusing process, and let's work on getting that scheduled, if you don't mind, Mr. Tiefenk.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Soboroff?
Yeah, Chief, question. Yesterday, the president spoke about his delight in sending in the law enforcement troops into Portland. And he said that he was also considering sending them into other cities. He specifically named New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, Detroit, Baltimore, and Oakland. My question is, have you or as a department received any word that they are even thinking about sending those kinds of officers into the city of Los Angeles?
No. I'm sorry. No. Yeah, there's been no discussion. I just had a conversation yesterday with the FBI director for this region here. We spoke of mutual interests around this region for public safety, and none of my other our federal counterparts have weighed in, nor has there been a request, nor do I see a need for that. We do work very closely with our federal partners, ATF, the FBI, DEA, relative to critical matters of public safety within their respective areas of responsibility, both counterterrorism, domestic terrorism, matters of gun violence, drug trade enterprise, and associated violence and impact it has on public safety. And we have a very effective relationship here. We work alongside very nicely, but I don't see any request or need for a surge at this point, and nor do I foresee it.
Thank you.
Anything further, Mr. Soboroff?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. Then Chief, a few quick questions and also a few follow-ups for Mr. Tiefenk. Mr. Tiefenk, could you also refer to the use of force subcommittee? I think a review of the video release policy would be in order. The chief talked about an incident that wasn't quite covered by the policy, and I think in light of that, it might be wise to have the use of force subcommittee review that policy just to be sure it's broad enough for the modern environment. Chief, and also Mr. Tiefenk, I think with respect to the questions on the mayor's directive on racial equity, let's have that referred to the strategic planning committee. Of course, Mr. Bonner is on that, but let's ask that subcommittee to take the lead on that. Chief, a few substantive questions for you. You spoke about GRID and summer night lights, the impact the pandemic has had on that program. And while I realize you don't run GRID, it's run through the mayor's office, but with the work of community-based organizations, I wonder if you have heard and can report to us other impacts the pandemic has caused on the ability of the various GRID teams to work in the community and do their jobs, if you know.
So that group is actually meeting today. It was we have last time I checked in on this was admittedly about 6 or 8 weeks ago. I spoke with Chief Arcos yesterday to speak with Ms. Tremblay, and they're meeting with all the contract providers today to survey yet again. The 6 to 8 week ago impact was ambassadors and outreach workers were considered essential workers and were allowed to be in public settings, and their engagement with neighborhood groups and individuals wasn't a critical aspect, in my view, and our view, for public safety and for dispelling rumors as well as quelling potential escalation of violence. We're now checking back in. They work closely at the area level, and I've not heard any adverse reports, but just in the increasing velocity that I've seen this last 4 weeks. We had a particularly really bad 3 weeks ago, but still, it's still a persistence. This year, our number of homicides for this month versus last year and the year before is higher, and shooting violence, we've lost a margin. So I'm concerned about what may be developing, and I want to get as close to the ground as we can to understand from workers who are doing outreach engagement, who are quelling rumors and trying to resolve disputes so they don't escalate. What's their sense? And that as that information develops, of course, I will share it.
Thank you. Certainly do appreciate that. And then a follow-up on the family violence information you provided, domestic violence. I've been on a few of those calls that your department has organized with providers, and certainly the numbers for the volume of calls that they are receiving has increased significantly. And a number of weeks ago, you reported about outreach that the department was doing to ensure members of the public who may be experiencing violence within their homes have access to appropriate phone numbers and information about places they can call.
Right.
Has the department continued those efforts? I just haven't heard a report on that. I just want to be sure those efforts are ongoing.
Yes, and primarily the primary means has been using supermarkets and and retail establishments that we still know are open and are potential gathering places of people who may find themselves the ability to leave the home, leave their family setting for what would be a bona fide or legitimate purpose, and being reminded that that's a safe space for them to reach out to us.
Okay, very well. Thank you, Chief. Let's close public comment. Madam Secretary, how many people are in queue for public comment, please?
Yes, we have 28.
All right, let's begin public comment.
Okay, we have I yield followed by Adam Smith.
Hello, this is I Yield. Do you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Okay, first of all, to all of you, police commissioners and Chief Moore, make a pledge to the people of Los Angeles that you will not cooperate with any attempts of the DHS or the U.S. Marshals, Border Controller, ICE to militarize our streets and enact violence and terror upon us. Thanks, Sobroff, for bringing it up. We need a solid pledge from Moore, Garcetti, and the police commission immediately because we do not need federal troops coming here. They are coming here. Stop lying. We saw what happened with the LAPD during the protest. Who? I don't believe you, Moore. I don't believe you. I need proof. We need a pledge. We demand that the LA Police Commission take immediate action to stop the implementation of data-informed community-focused policing, which criminalizes poverty and perpetuates systemic racism. Okay, no categorical use of violence this week. Well, it was last Tuesday that the LAPD brutalized a man in a wheelchair and broke the wheelchair. Is that not use of violence? This is an example of how twisted and full of shit Chief Moore is. Bonner, you talked about reaching out to Black and brown men to discuss their perspective on the LAPD. When is that happening? Do you need guidance? Reach out to BLM.
Thank you. Adam Smith, followed by caller ending in 3892.
Hi, good morning again. Chief, you really put too much credence in the fact that the racial demographics of your department match those of the city. Unlike Steve, who can't formulate a coherent question, Bonner actually asked decent questions, but I don't think they go far enough because it's obvious that the racial demographics of a police department don't inform the brutality and the anti-Blackness inherent to policing. I hope that Mr. Bonner, with, the thoughts and questions that he actually brings to some of these meetings, that we talk about how to reduce the scope of the LAPD. How are we reducing the contacts between the LAPD and the Black community and the poor community and the brown community and other communities where it doesn't matter the fucking racial demographics. People are still going to be brutalized.
Thank you. Caller ending in 3892, followed by MW.
Hi, Eric Chevron. I'm back. Just wanted here to remind everyone that this is the 2-year anniversary of the murder of Melly Corrado by LAPD officers. Their names are Sinlen Sa and Sarah Winans. Let's remind everyone that their murder was in policy ruled by Chief Moore, who told the LA Times that another man killed them. And let's remind everyone that Melly Corrado worked at Trader Joe's, and it was ruled in policy that they fired bullets into the store and they killed Melly Corrado. And they are now charging a different person, a Black person who is severely mentally ill, with murder. Let's remind everyone that this was considered in policy, and reminding everyone that we will tear the LAPD apart piece by piece, because ruling this in policy is inhumane and it is genocidal. It is beyond awful. Chief Moore, you must resign and you must accept responsibility for this.
Thank you. MW, followed by Darren Kim.
To get back to my previous comment of Chief Moore exhibiting the psychological traits of Machiavellianism, which is a manipulative attitude, Chief Moore began his statement by gaslighting. His very first statement today, quote unquote, protesters came upon officers. Really? Or was it LAPD officers who came upon peaceful protesters and beat a man, destroying his wheelchair? Chief Moore's statements are filled with the spin and lies of the #1 department of use of force in the United States of America. There's the data that Chief Grimala gave just a couple of weeks ago. Narcissism, excessive self-love, Chief Moore's defensiveness with the slightest of questioning from Commissioner Bonner exhibited this. Psychopathy, lack of empathy, absolutely everything that comes out of his mouth, especially today on the anniversary of the murder of Melly Corrado by his department. This is the time to fire Chief Moore.
Thank you. Darren Kim, followed by caller ending in 3146.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Hi, good morning. Just thank you for the dialogue between Chief Moore and Commissioner Bonner. I hope this is a step forward for the department. Chief Moore, I just hope that that your officers are on the front line and that you will receive whatever feedback that they can give, because I really don't think that Mayor Garcetti's initiative about racial equality and racial justice is not enough. In fact, I just think he only cares about press time and what's in his pockets. This is just the hopes that the LAPD can be a leader in terms of racial equality and racial justice. I'm just thankful for the community critical incident briefings in regards to that matter as a first act of transparency, and I hope more progress can be forward in that area. Other than that, I'm just so thankful for the progress has been made, with the exception of Commissioner Soboroff. What kind of question was that? Chief Moore has enough on his plate, so ask something relevant to the agenda. I yield my time.
Thank you. Caller ending in 3146, followed by Paula Miner.
Hi, it's the commission, the chief badge tarnishers is the commission. Remember when this officer, he said, after Rosario Mack fell to the ground, he's 10 to 15 feet away and he looks like he's getting ready to charge me. How does a guy that's on the ground charge an officer? And I love the police department. I'm trying to stand up for you guys, but there's so much BS. So he says, so I take another shot at him. He's on the ground. He shoots him on the ground. You found him out of policy. You didn't fire. This is what is problem with the commission. You see, the reason these events have taken place is because of people like you in the commission. Isn't it the greater Jewish Federation that's given us a chop down of freedom of speech, Eileen? Chopping freedom of speech. We got people here. You only do this for one day. We got so much to talk about, so much wrong with the chief, so much wrong with the toilet mayor, so much wrong. Where is Figueroa? That's fraud. Where is the carpet licker? That's fraud.
Thank you. Paula Miner, followed by Nadine Bedrosian.
Can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
I'm commenting on the incident Chief Moore referred to at the beginning of his presentation. The beating of Joshua Wilson, the Black man, disabled, wheelchair bound, who was being arrested as part of an arrest of protesters. Now, you can arrest people, but separately, while 6 or 7 officers were struggling with the man on the ground, the wheelchair was at least 4 to 5 feet away. One officer walked over to the empty wheelchair, took his baton and beat the wheelchair until it broke. Now, the arrest, we can question back and forth. What is the reason for beating up a wheelchair? This is another example of the crazy violence that is led by Chief Moore. His officers are out of control. We've been talking about that for 7 years. Chief Moore must go. Chief Moore must go. This is totally ridiculous.
Thank you. Nadine Bedrosian, followed by Audrey George.
Hi. First of all, I want to thank one of the previous callers for mentioning how, sometimes when something is done within policy, it's still inhumane. I mean, slavery was within policy. The genocide of the Native Americans in this country was within policy. So the policy needs to change. I just really want to express my severe disappointment with the connection between this commission and the public. It really doesn't feel like we're being heard. It doesn't really feel like our public comments are taken into real thought and consideration. It just seems like we're opening the forum for public comment and then, okay, we're done with that. Now we'll go on to business as usual. So it's very disappointing. Thank you.
Thank you. Audrey George, followed by Jamie Garcia.
Yes, it would take far more than just a minute to give appropriate attention to Moore's lies about LAPD officers' interactions with nonviolent protesters and their violent disregard for the civil and human rights of those protesters. The feds probably feel that their particular type of intimidation would be overkill here in LA. It has been well documented. It is not a matter for doubt or erasure, but the PC has totally failed to give this matter any attention. Any increase in violence, as reported by Moore, can be linked to the crime suppression efforts set forth in LAPD's data-informed, community-focused policing manual. LAPD's offender-based approach results in people living in fear of incarceration and removal from their communities. And it often results in fatal assaults by LAPD. Offender-based policing is driven by LAPD's evil reverence for reducing crime over every other priority, regardless of human impact and ineffectiveness. It is merely a means of LAPD.
Thank you. Jamie Garcia, followed by Hamid Khan.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Hi. So, I just wanted to comment on, and I appreciate this kind of effort towards transparency and, making the disciplinary process more available to the community, because I think we have to realize that LAPD does a lot without telling the community what they're doing. We saw this with Laser, we saw this with Predpol, and we're seeing this more and more as we're receiving more public records requests around surveillance. I think that, Moore can kind of give lip service to wanting to work with the public, but it's very obvious that he's part and parcel of a system that has remained kind of innocuous and unavailable to the community. So again, if we're not going to talk about surveillance, we're not talking about police violence. We sent a letter to the commission. Moore received a copy of this as well. We expect a response. And we know we need to continue to talk about what data-informed community-focused policing is, what surveillance tech it's driven by. And if we're not talking about that, we're not doing a service to the community. Bonner, you want to do these open sessions? Let's talk about it.
Thank you. Hamid Khan, followed by Joseph Okon.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple comments. First, about this whole federal police coming into Los Angeles. I mean, I think we have to understand that we're already very federalized. We have to look at the relationship between the LAPD, the Sheriff's Department, and the Joint Regional Intelligence Center, the Fusion Center. We have to look at the Joint Terrorism Task Forces that they're already a part of. We have to look at Moore's own comments of how LAPD and the FBI will be investigating all the CCTV footage during the uprisings and the rebellions too. So let's not try to mask any of that. But going back to the comments about the inequalities that were made by Moore, it's interesting that as he speaks from both sides of his mouth, this is what Jamie Garcia was raising, that inequalities are embedded within the system, where they're targeted with a clear line to target certain communities. iWatch, SAR, see something, say something, and all of that. And lastly, Moore, your discovery and your public records piece, folks are completely doing circles around us. 194995. That.
Thank you, Gina Viola, followed by Joseph Okon.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Okay, thank you. So the problem for me with the chief's report is I no longer believe a word the chief says. And that's really, really troubling, given that you are in charge of the largest law enforcement agency here in the city. And I don't trust it because I feel like you say whatever we need to hear in your very vague statistics that you give us. For most of the time, if crime needs to be going down because that's a sentiment people want to hear, that's what you tell us. If crime needs to be going up to validate what you do, then that's what you'll tell us. So, and in terms of truth, Chief Moore, you lied and said that the bullet that killed Mellie wasn't from an LAPD gun. You should be fired for that alone, for the way you handled that whole case, denying them an autopsy, denying them ability to see their family member. I mean, the way you terrorize that family, we spoke about it many times. Also, the feds don't need to come in because the LA.
Thank you. Joseph Okon, followed by Paul Hennessy.
Can you guys hear me?
Hi, yes.
All right, summer night lights, whatever resources go to these creepy police block parties should be going directly to the community. Chief Moore's claim that summer night lights reduces crime is bullshit. Removing police from the community reduces crime because police are not there to stop crime, they're there to criminalize communities. Disciplinary stuff. Of course, the LAPPL, headed by skinhead murderer Jamie McBride, who shot 6 people and whose daughter murdered Daniel Hernandez, are concerned about being held accountable because they know they're racist murderers. That's why they do this job. For this reason, the phrase ensuring fairness and this concern about ultimate and arbitrary authority and disciplinary proceedings sounds so gross coming out of your mouth, Chief. You know what's really fucked? The ultimate or arbitrary authority the LAPD has to murder people with impunity. That's exactly what happened with the officers Sin Lindsay and Sarah Winans, who murdered Melanie Corrado and then for whom the chief covered, lied to the press, suppressed the autopsy, and has kept both of them on the force. It's 2 years to the day that that happened. Fuck you.
Thank you. Paul Hennessy, followed by John Avalos.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
So I'm calling to demand the firing of Sarah Winans and Sin Lindsay for the murder of Melanie Corrado. I'm also calling to demand the firing of Chief Moore, who tried to sweep this incident under the rug and deem the shooting in policy. I do not feel protected or heard under Moore's leadership. We just watched him try and dismiss Commissioner Bonner's questions. You know, Moore's done nothing but make tensions between police and Angelenos worse, especially with the handling of recent protests. You guys are talking about reform, but we're still seeing abuses of power. For example, putting a security hold on Melanie Corrado's autopsy and lying to the LA Times about who actually killed her. Additionally, the violent arrest of Joshua Wilson was incredibly inhumane. I'm trying to support you guys, but you're making it impossible to do so. So if you want to earn back the trust of your city and build relationships as you claim, become more transparent, not less, and listen to the people who've been calling in. Fire Moore and the officers responsible for the death of Melanie Corrado. Thank you.
Thank you. John Avalos, followed by Bobby Pepe.
Hi. Hello.
Hi, you're on.
Joseph Ocon just mentioned the Saturday Night Lights project. You know, when I was doing voter registration back in 2000, that was going on already. That's been going on for a long time, this Saturday Night Lights. How much money goes into that? And look at all the problems we're having. You talk so much, oh, so many gangs out there, oh. And yet this Saturday Night Lights, it is not helping at all because you're building another jail in Wilmington for the gangs. It's crazy, you know? And you talk about, oh, and by the way, the president, you called it GRID. You referred to the GRID groups with the chief. Why are you hiding what GRID means? Please do not use GRID again, the gang reduction youth development. Is that what GRID is? How dare you use GRID to hide another money wasted project?
Thank you. Bobby Pepe, followed by LB. Bobby, can you try unmuting on your end, please? Okay, okay. Oh, there you are.
I just wanted to mention that. And then I wanted to mention when Chief Moore came to our church, Dolores Mission, and he promised not to wear a revolver on the altar. And when he came in, he had a revolver on him and he had a dozen plainclothes policemen with machine guns in their back. This was at a Roman Catholic parish, Dolores Mission, and he violated the agreement. Everyone was outraged. And I learned what kind of person Chief Moore was at that gathering with him. And it's disgusting to me. Thank you.
Thank you. LB, followed by Michelle Fowl.
Hello, I would like to voice my agreement with earlier callers saying it's ridiculous how you put all the agenda items
in bulk and only allow one opportunity for public comment. I didn't get to speak. You make it very confusing, as you also don't warn people as to when they need to raise their hands. It seems like you are trying to suppress people's voices. For my public comment, I would like to say fire Chief Moore, fuck Chief Moore, fuck Chief Moore. On the anniversary of Melly Corrado's death, a woman who was murdered by idiotic LAPD officers who fired into a crowded grocery store within a few seconds of arriving, I say again, fuck Chief Moore. An entity so reckless that it shoots wantonly into a building of civilians in its pursuit to kill a Black man does not deserve to exist. Defund and abolish the LAPD. Also, listening to you speak to Commissioner Bonner, you are so disrespectful, Chief Moore. And it's ridiculous that you say flipping a man out of his wheelchair and breaking it doesn't count as a use of force. Defund, abolish the police.
Thank you. Michelle Fowl, followed by Betty Lay.
Hi, thank you. So Black and brown communities are way over policed and they have a severe lack of resources. This is a huge problem. The police is way over militarized and their focus is on targeting Black and brown communities because they don't have the resources. They can't find back. It's easy to criminalize the poor and mass incarcerate people of color. This has been a problem for way too long. I am supportive of defunding the police and reinvesting into our communities with services that benefit them. No more policing, no more data-informed community-focused policing is total BS. It just criminalizes Black and brown people and poor people. And I request that Police Chief Moore resign. You're shameful.
Thank you. Betty Lay, followed by Kim Isaac. Betty Lay, you're on. Oh. Okay, well, we can come back to.
Can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Okay, first off, people need to understand Chief Moore does not have the authority or the final decision on anything. They need to understand it's from the Board of Commissioners. I do not agree with all the other callers. I support LAPD. I support Chief Moore, and I support defending the LAPD. It has to be that way. May everybody stay safe and healthy. Thank you.
Thank you. Kim Isaacs, followed by Zach Sherwin.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Okay, thank you. I really don't understand how this police department has been run this way for so many years, just randomly killing Angelenos with no accountability. And this commission has just allowed it to continue. How we can't have peaceful protests without the police showing up in riot gear to protect what? Property, spraying people with rubber bullets. I mean, this has got to stop. And this federal group that's coming in to kidnap people for peaceful protesting, we need to be against that. We need to protect our citizens for doing something we're allowed to do under the First Amendment. This is why people talking about defunding the police, because it's done nothing but terrorize Black and brown communities. It's done nothing but terrorize peaceful protesters, something that we're allowed to do under the First Amendment. This is shameful. This is why we want to reimagine public safety immediately.
Thank you, Zach Sherwin, and then Heather C.
Okay, a minute's too short. Chief Moore took it for hours that one day, so we know he can handle it. Give people 2 minutes to talk. Bonner, your questions are great, but the point that Hamid Khan made before still stands. The inequalities are embedded in the system. A more diverse police force won't stop what LAPD does, defund and abolish. This commission is a disgrace. Bonner says that he doesn't want to be pigeonholed as the one of you who wants some meaningful change here. Soboroff and Decker, you don't say anything. The chief doesn't say anything to even acknowledge that it was said. It's what you are at your essence. Soboroff, you're a lost cause, though. Still, fuck you. And Decker, you should be ashamed for not making some kind of response to what he said. Finally, fire Moore. Moore, you lied about Melly Corrado. You lie all the time. Lip service and word salad. You belong at the head of this department like a revolver belongs on the altar of a Catholic church. Defund LAPD, fire Chief Moore, Melly forever. Fuck you guys. You're a disgrace to this city.
Thank you. Heather C., followed by Alice Wetterlund.
Hi, guys. Thanks. So I just want to say that the majority of citizens in LA support LAPD and law and order. Black Lives Matter is extremely well organized, and they're very vocal, but they definitely don't represent the masses. If anything, most of us want more officers on the streets, not less. And I don't believe that the Black Lives Matter is there to really help underserved Blacks, but more so to destabilize the system, which inevitably is going to make all of our neighborhoods less safe. We need more jail space, Prop 47 and AB 109 reversed, and consequences brought back for criminals who victimize Angelenos. In regards to the mayor's directive, I'm a little concerned as to how that's going to be achieved with the budget cuts, and I have 13 seconds left. Unless our leaders, our LAPD leaders, start speaking the truths about LAPD statistics, I don't know how we're going to be recruiting any more minorities.
Thank you. Alice Wetterlund, followed by Joe Michaud. Alice, can you unmute?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Hi, yes.
And then okay. All right. Hi guys, thanks for hearing me. I need you to be the civilian voice in police affairs. I need you to fire Chief Moore. I've been on the streets. I've heard the civilian voice, and the civilian voice, the real civilian voice, it's not deferential. Yeah, it's loud, and it's getting louder. These families need justice. The city deserves justice. Why are Chief Moore's many lies and failures and blunders just excused? Okay, accountability is for adults. Okay, let's be adults here. And now that you're discussing initiating firing procedures, Chief Moore is on his way out. That's great. All right, but while he's still here, let's have him release the names of all the officers found to have engaged in corrupt practices and include their names on a Brady list so they're not witnesses in other cases. And the district attorney and the city attorney need to drop all charges against citizens being prosecuted as results of arrests made by these officers. They shouldn't be in custody. Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you. Joe Michaud, followed by Larry Stern.
Hey, what's up, Mike? I just wanted to say that I think you showed the entire city your true colors when you went on live TV with Mayor Garcetti and blamed the protesters and the destruction of property. You blamed the death of George Floyd on protesters and the destruction of property. And I know you roll your fucking eyes at me right now and you twist your little ring and you're anxious and you're nervous because you know what's coming next. But guess what? You said what you fucking said. And we know where that came from. You are a white supremacist. You are a liar. You are a danger to every single Angeleno. Fuck you. You are getting what's going to come to you. Melly forever. Fuck the police. Fuck Chief Moore.
Okay, thank you. Larry Stern, followed by Frank Mienk.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Hi, Larry. Yes, you're on.
I come before you today as a stakeholder in Los Angeles for almost 50 years with my support for equal treatment and justice for all ethnicities, First Amendment rights for peaceful protest, and the adherence of law and order. I'm a firm believer that the funding of $150 million allocated in the city's budget should be earmarked towards the revitalization of challenged areas of the city and offering new programs and opportunities to those in those areas to forge ahead with productive lives, but not when those dollars are taken away from the area of public safety. I find it extremely dismaying that this $150 million was dissected from LAPD's annual budget faster than I can comprise my own modest household budget when there are approximately 75 category line items in the 2019-2020 budget totaling $9 billion that could have been trimmed to come up with that same number. I feel very strongly that if this was a ballot measure put to the voters' choice, it would have gone in that direction. With that said, if our mayor was truly out for the best interest and safety of the people of Los Angeles as a whole, instead of political aspirations, $1 would not have been taken away from the LAPD. Furthermore, with less than 1% of the 9,974 of LA's finest succumbing to disciplinary.
Thank you. Frank Meanick, followed by caller ending in 1248.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having this event and allowing me to talk. I want to talk to Mr. Moore about just being an officer and a civil servant. Civil servants are supposed to be beneath the citizens. That's how this democracy is set up. And over the years, and I know he doesn't control all this, but he does control some of it, is that over the years, our lobbyists during unions have moved them above the citizens with their probable cause and are treading all over our Fourth Amendment rights, especially Black people. This is the real solution to the problem. Our Fourth Amendment rights have been tread on by our civil servants. When you are a servant, you are to serve us humbly. A humble servant, that is what God intended for us. When we come out of our door, every one of us every day should be of service to the world to make it a better place. Your officers are no longer civil servants, but they become our overlords. And you know about the attitude that it takes. You learn in the precincts and you learn in your academies about how to tread all over our Fourth Amendment all the time. You know this is true by using the drug laws. If you would eliminate those drug laws and stop treading on our Fourth Amendment right, you will truly see some peace in this country. Please find me and I will talk to you more.
Thank you. Caller ending in 1248, followed by our last speaker, Connie.
Hi, this is the 2-year anniversary of the murder of Melly Curado by LAPD officers Simran Say and Sarah Winans. They shot blindly into a Trader Joe's trying to kill a Black man, and they are now trying to charge that Black man with murdering her, even though they did it. You've given them impunity more. How is this murder in policy? Also, you said that you know that this is every officer's worst nightmare to harm an innocent bystander during a violent engagement, that you spoke with both the officers and that they were devastated. What about Melly's fucking family? That's their worst nightmare. They're devastated. You also were talking about spousal abuse earlier. Let's talk about how cops have the highest rate of spousal abuse. Where are your wives supposed to go when you beat the shit out of them? Your fucking buddies? I don't think so. People cannot stay safe and healthy with the police. It doesn't have to be that way. If you.
Thank you. And our final speaker, Connie.
And Madam Secretary, before the last speaker speaks, please clear the queue for public speaking on the chief's report and open public comment agenda item number 3. Thank you.
Hi, can I be heard?
Hi, yes, you're up.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if this one's relevant to what we're doing. I think this is just public comment time. I'm not sure what it's on, but I'm just gonna say regarding the fireworks, this might be off the tread, but it's to me, it's an act of terrorism when people are blowing off the M80s from May, June, July, August through September. And I'm not for police defunding, but even last year when we had plenty of funds, the cops didn't show up anyway. So I'm just wondering, do we need to empower people to do citizens arrest? Because my feelings are such rage that either I'm going to get killed or somebody's going to get hurt, allegedly, because there's so much anger in the people that are being abused by this, that you're going to have a problem. We really need to change the laws drastically. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, close public comment on general public comment. How many speakers are in queue, please?
Yes, we have 15 speakers.
All right, let's begin general public comment, please.
Okay, we have Naomi followed by T.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Hi, I'm not sure if this is the right exactly like avenue to say this, but well, first of all, I just would like to start by acknowledging Chief Moore. Look, I get it. It's hard to sit there and be called out, but just a reminder that you're here to serve us and we're angry. And ultimately all of that pales in comparison to how we Angelinos feel as our community is brutalized before our eyes. Anyway, let me get to the point. 2 years ago, Melly Corrado was killed by the LAPD. Sin Lince and Sarah Winans shot recklessly and blindly into a grocery store in broad daylight. They killed Melly Corrado and they tried to hide the truth from Melly's family, and they faced zero consequences. And if any of us civilians had done that, you better believe we would have been arrested and charged. And yet, for Melly, justice was not served. Why is the LAPD so trigger happy? Why are they irresponsible? There's no accountability. And LAPD has more than enough money to provide adequate de-escalation training, way too much money, in fact, over half of our general fund. You're here to protect and serve the community, not each other. You can start by firing and prosecuting Sin Lince and Sarah Wine.
Thank you. T followed by I yield.
Can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Defund and abolish the LAPD. Fire Chief Moore. Fire the officers and prosecute the ones that killed Melly Corrado. Fire the officers that killed Grishario Mack. That's Martin Lee and Martin Robles need to be fired and prosecuted. Fire and prosecute the 600 and the folks that fire and prosecute the officers that killed the 609 folks here in LA. Defund the police. Fire Chief Moore. Fire and prosecute the officers that have killed the 609 people here in Los Angeles, including Grishario Mack. That's Brian Lee and Martin Robles. Fire the officers that killed Melly Corrado. Defund and abolish the police. Fire Chief Moore. Good day.
Thank you. I yield followed by MW.
Okay, I'm back again. Hi, Moore. All right, guys, it's been 2 years since the LAPD murder of Melly Corrado. Decker, you could have asked for a moment of silence for her. Fire LAPD officer Sarah Winans and Sin Lince. Fire Moore. Bonner seems to be the only person on this call with a fucking pulse. I wish we could do a sweeping replacement of all of you immediately. The volunteer activists of Los Angeles do more work than you do in 5 minutes. They do more work in 5 minutes than you do in a fucking week between these fucking meetings. And they're not even getting paid. You get 6-digit salaries to oversee the LAPD, but you're spineless, soulless, flaccid non-beings. More lies. He kept Melly Corrado's autopsy report from her family. He ordered a toxicology report on her body after they murdered her, which is totally consistent with his MO of blaming victims for getting murdered. His officers fired it into a crowded grocery store on a fucking Saturday afternoon because they wanted to kill a black man, period. Bonner, grow your teeth. You got a lot more work to do. You said you're going to meet with black and brown male Angelinos about this bullshit.
Thank you. MW followed by Jan Williams.
Listening to caller Heather C. propagate old fears, lies, and baseless data is like listening to this oversight commission each week. Watching Steve Sobroff shake his head back and forth while listening to callers is beyond frustrating. Why be in this position if you cannot absorb, process, and act accordingly to the frustrations of the people impacted by the violence and the corruption of this militarized LAPD? So this is my question. What do you all oversee? You all are volunteers here that have direct access to the mayor of Los Angeles, who has the ability to fire corrupt Chief Moore instead of paying him over $500,000 a year to terrorize and waste taxpayers' dollars. But you sit here week after week approving anonymous donations, apathetically approving use of force, approving the destruction of original records. Why do you just blindly approve what another government body has approved? Do you want justice? Do you want justice for Melly? Fire Chief.
Thank you. We have Jan Williams followed by Hamid Khan.
Hi, this is Jan Williams. I'm calling to ask y'all to please fire Chief Moore. He refuses to hold killer cops accountable, and I'm actually asking y'all to also fire all killer cops. Make public all of these officers who have misconduct cases in their file and get rid of them as well. Write some policies that will produce transparency so that we know who is policing our community, defund the police, defund these homeless task forces, disarm the police who are responding to mental health crisis. We need you as a Civilian Oversight Commission to actually write some policies that will keep us safe, write some policies that will allow you to fire these officers, make their names public. And also, if you're going to get rid of these racist police, you have to change the policies. Yeah.
Thank you. Hamid Khan, followed by Matthew Pardue. Oh, sorry.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
So, Bonner, today, one of the big news is coming from Popular Mechanics that hundreds of mathematicians are boycotting predictive policing. Now, this on the heels of last October when we submitted a letter where over 400 academics had written a letter completely rejecting the merits and ethics of Jeff Ranthingham's research on predpol. But here we are constantly circling back that what is happening is that how the department and the commission remains wedded to the pseudoscience. We see the data-informed community-focused policing. We see how deeply predictive algorithms are a part of this thing, how deeply the crime prevention through environmental design is a part of this thing, how deeply the whole architecture of surveillance is a part and parcel of something. So on one hand, you keep on talking about inequalities and this whole verbal kind of judo that we listen to, but on the other hand, the tools of harm remain very much in place. So unless those are dismantled, and here you have even mathematicians screaming at you.
Thank you. Matthew Pardo, followed by a caller ending in 8921.
All right, I'm going to try to fit this all in. Miss Paula's point about the officers intentionally breaking Joshua Wilson's wheelchair is further proof that the LAPD is here to terrorize the community. Also, I find it truly disgusting that Sobroff had to delete a tweet of his calling out people that don't wear masks because he realized that it was a contradiction to the fact that most of LAPD refuses to wear masks. I've sent you all multiple emails about this and not gotten a response. Lastly, on this 2-year anniversary of Melly Corrado's murder, I'm calling for Sinlin Say and Sarah Winans to be fired and charged with murder. Moore continued his history of lies when he told the LA Times that it wasn't an LAPD bullet that killed Melly when he knew it was. It's time to fire Chief Moore, Melly forever.
Okay, thank you. Caller ending in 8921, followed by Rebecca Vaith.
Good morning, this is Angela Seekman. On July 21st, 2018, LAPD fired 8 rounds into a crowded Trader Joe's, killing Melly Corrado. But you, Chief Moore, and the LAPD Commission ruled Officer Sinlin Say and Sarah Winans' devastating actions were ruled in policy for murdering Melly Corrado. Yet you are also charging Gene Atkins, but it was your LAPD officers that fired the fatal shot. You held the autopsy results an entire year, further traumatizing Melly Corrado's family. We want Say and Winans to be held accountable. You are growing killers and protecting them. We as the community are reimagining public safety because we know violence in response to violence perpetuates more violence. I'm deeply concerned with anyone who would want to be employed where you work alongside killers and believe it's in policy to do so. What does their mental health look like? LAPD traumatizes communities. Defund the police. Chief Moore, you must go. Grow communities, not killers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca Vaith, followed by Joseph Ocon.
Can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Hi, Commissioners, Chief Moore. You know that Officers Sinlin Say and Sarah Winans are the cops that murdered Melly Corrado. That's the truth. That's what the autopsy shows. The same one Chief Moore withheld from her family for an entire year. Are you proud of yourself for framing Gene Atkins for the brutal actions and violence of your own officers? Let me remind you, blood is on your hands. Your casual disregard for human life makes me sick. Chief Moore, When did you lose your humanity? Was it when you put on that uniform or when you lied to the face of a grieving father? You sit there and pat yourself on the back for lower reporting numbers of domestic violence, but you allow officers who are known abusers to keep their jobs and brutalize peaceful protesters. You're a disgrace. I can't wait till you're fired and your department is dismantled. Melly Corrado forever. Charge Sin Lindsay and Sarah.
Thank you. Joseph Ocon, followed by Larry Stern.
So you all have heard many times that this is the 2-year anniversary of this department murdering Melly Corrado at the Silver Lake Trader Joe's. And there has been no recognition of this anniversary by the board. And hey, you probably forgot. But you've been reminded many times this meeting. Nobody asked if family members were on the call. There's been absolutely nothing. And of course, we don't expect this from you. As Hamid said a few weeks ago, these meetings are designed to mock pain, to humiliate the grief of those who have lost loved ones to the LAPD. And as we saw in the chief's report, Moore is already attempting to spin his officer's brutal beating of Joshua Wilson out of a wheelchair and then intentionally breaking the wheelchair. We're seeing it with the case of Jermaine Welch, who is being charged for being shot 6 times, possibly by this department. And of course, we saw it and continue to see it with the LAPD response to their murder of Melly Corrado. Fire Sin Lindsay and Sarah Winans, fire Ryan Lee and Martin Robles for murdering Gashario Mack, fire Chief Moore, and of course, abolish the...
Thank you. Larry Stern, followed by Audrey George.
Can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Okay. Good morning once again. President Decker, with all due respect, I find 1 minute inadequate to voice, constructive opinions. But in continuation from my last presentation, I have the highest regard, admiration, and respect for Chief Moore and his 40 years of law enforcement experience, with his leadership second to none. It is my every hope for all those in Los Angeles that the areas that Chief Moore is now forced to cut are ancillary areas and do not affect the essential duties of the fine men and women of the department that protect each and every one of us 24 hours a day, along with an equal number of officers hired to offset those that have completed their end of watch into retirement. With the civil unrest taking place in Los Angeles in the aftermath of the tragic and wrongful death of Mr. George Floyd, I feel certain that all law-abiding citizens in all economic areas of the city that do comprise a silent majority do not want to see our level of public safety reduced and experience the level of violent crime and property crime escalating to the vast numbers now taking place in other major cities throughout the country. In closing, what a shame it is that the media does not give the spotlight for all those.
Thank you. We have Audrey George, followed by Adam Smith.
Before you start my time, I would just like to say that you should be giving some people a chance to raise their hands again, because myself and several others.
For time. No one gets to stop their time.
You lowered people's hands, and I was one of the only ones who actually noticed it and raised it within that brief time. There are numerous people who wanted to speak and aren't getting a chance. Change the day of the week for your meetings. Today, once again, the Board of Supervisors agenda is packed with urgent items. Civic engagement shouldn't require community members to choose venues. Why has the PC never taken this point seriously? Any meetings held with commissioners in the community about racial disparities in policing must include the real experts. BLM-LA, LA CAN, and Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, in recognition of their leadership and knowledge. None of those you hear speaking in PC supporting them are paid agitators, like some suggest. True systemic change will come slowly, but their impact has already shifted the conversation held in PC meetings and in the city council. Dismiss and disrespect what they say at your own.
We have Adam Smith, followed by American.
Good morning. Yeah, just to lift up what Audrey just said. Hey, Steve, when you're talking about paid people that call in, are you talking about people like this dude, Larry Stern, who according to Twitter is the board secretary of fucking Devonshire CPAB? Hey, Larry, maybe you should use a fake name if you're calling in as a cop. Anywho, it's absolutely shameful that this board condoned and excused the murder of Melly Corrado by finding it in policy. And it's absolutely more shameful that Eric Garcetti appointed you all in your role as civilian voice and actually approved of the murder of Melly Corrado. It's a shame that Eric Garcetti doesn't have the spine to actually do anything except deny his responsibility when shit hits the fan. He's a coward, and it shows through all of your inaction.
Thank you. We have American followed by Nicole Cook.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Hi, I do want to say another wonderful week, everyone. Chief Moore, you know the deal, man. We love you. We just don't like the racial injustice what's going on. I feel like even though you're the face of it, I feel like it's not entirely your fault. I don't feel like you're entirely a racist, brother. I see some soul in your eyes, you know what I mean? It's just that you have a few knuckleheads that's messing it up for you, and that's not fair for you, you know? I hear that you're not able to fire officers. I feel like that is ridiculous. Being a chief, you should be able to fire your officers that's making this hell come on you. But now, Chief, common sense things once again. I feel like you should be able to fire officers if they're inadequate. I feel like as well, citizens, if cameras are not on from the start of the stop, the case should be thrown out entirely. Also for shootings, blood tests should be happening. I feel like these are common sense laws, Chief. We love you, brother. Peace and love, man. Not all Black people hate you, you know what I mean? It's just that we've been through a lot, brother.
Thank you. We have Nicole Cook followed by Michelle Fowl.
Hi, I also had my hand raised like Audrey George, and my hand was unraised. So anyway, I just want to keep highlighting that Mr. Moore was unanimously fired in the June 2nd meeting. You guys continue to ignore the public's demands, so you have no place talking about serving the public. Mr. Moore's attempts at fear-mongering with these homicidal statistics is a weak deflection technique. This past week, Joshua Wilson was beat and arrested while peacefully protesting in a wheelchair. Meanwhile, Moore says no use of force. Mr. Moore overwrites the murder of Melly Corrado because it's in policy. How convenient for him. And then he's talking about how everyone needs to be held accountable. And on that note, I believe he mentioned his meeting with the director of the Police Commission League regarding maintaining accountability for those in power. I just want to be sure that this accountability also applies to the daughter of the police union director, Officer Tony McBride, who murdered civilian Daniel Hernandez. I hear all these words, and I can't believe any of it until I see some action. Black Lives Matter, defund the police.
Thank you. We have Michelle Fowl followed by caller ending in 8755.
Hi, thank you. I find it quite offensive that you guys wanted to start the meeting by honoring the late John Lewis, who has been victimized by police over and over and over again, while you continue to protect officers just like that. You should really be ashamed of your blatant hypocrisy. It's gross. John Lewis deserves much better than that. Chief Moore is obstructing justice by delaying and prolonging investigations of killer cops. Why is it? Why is it that they can quickly conduct and conclude an investigation of Black people and brown people, which ends up either blaming the victim, a poor person, or a person of color? Black lives definitely matter. This comes from a white person who is very focused on this issue and supports it. If Chief Moore won't resign, he needs to be fired immediately.
Thank you. And that previous caller and the following two callers were carried over from item 1. We have caller ending in 8755, followed by our last speaker, Heather C.
Hi, I'd like to speak on the failures of the LAPD in regard to the murder of Melly Corrado. 2 years ago, she was shot at her place of work, and you ruled that her murder was in policy. Murder should never be considered in policy, full stop. That's something that you can't reform. The LAPD is done. Chief Moore has got to go. You failed to fire the officers responsible for her murder. You lied to the LA Times about whose bullet killed her. You tried to blame a Black man. Shame on you. We're coming for your budget. That money belongs to the people. We will defund the LAPD, and we will abolish you. The police don't protect people. The people protect people. Melly forever. Fuck you.
Okay, thank you. And our final speaker, Heather C.
Madam Secretary, before she begins, clear the queue, which is what we do at the conclusion of public comment. And now we will reopen it for the closed session items. The only issues that should be discussed in the next round of public comment will be related specifically to the two closed session items. With that, our final speaker on public comment.
Okay. Heather C., you're on.
I'm sorry, which items are,
This is
am I
public
speaking to?
comment.
Just general?
Yes.
Okay, so I think to finish my point from earlier, I am all for recruiting, more minority officers, but my feeling is that I'd like to hear, some of the more of the leadership within LAPD come forth publicly and really speak to the demographics of the department and the reform measures that the department has taken over the last 20, 30 years. I don't feel that LAPD has a problem with systemic racism as many other departments may around the nation. And I'd like to hear that be talked about more to the public without any fear of retaliation or pushback from Black Lives Matter. I think they need to hear facts. So that's all. Thank you.
All right, that concludes general public comment. We will now move on to the closed session items. Please close public comment on that, Madam Secretary. Speakers are reminded that the only matters appropriate to speak on are the two closed session items. How many people are in queue?
Yes, we have 17 speakers.
Okay, let's begin.
Zach Sherwin, followed by Miranda.
Yeah, I 100% had my hand raised to give public comment. I understand the function of the Zoom meeting. I know how it works. I clicked the raise hand button to give public comment, and the next time I looked, my hand was unhighlighted blue. So I don't know if it was inadvertent or not, but you guys lowered my hand to give public comment. Nevertheless, I will go ahead and take the opportunity to speak on these closed session items. I just am so dismayed by whatever findings you come back with. There's a lack of meaningful accountability for the officers who are just committing these flagrantly racist acts. And even when you do find people out of policy, like in the killing of Grishario Mack, there's no action from the chief. And so hearing public comment from us on these closed session items, one despairs at the thought of any meaningful change coming from the way things are. And that doesn't even cover cases like the killing of Melly Corrado, which was found in policy by this commission.
Thank you. We have Miranda, followed by Adam Smith.
Hi, Chief Moore. I'm just really concerned about the fact that you're the person that's supposed to be holding public employees accountable, considering nobody holds you accountable, specifically Eric Garcetti and those that are your colleagues. I think that you definitely do need to step down. It's evident that nobody's
You're
going
not
to fire
speaking
you.
about the two matters that are in closed session.
Chief Moore is the title and the topic of today. So
Now
that
that
being
you're-
said,
the
I
last
do
topic
definitely
was
think that you need
the
to step down.
Speaker. The only topics that can now be covered are with respect to these two closed session items. Please go to our next speaker, Madam Secretary.
We have Adam Smith, followed by Nick.
Yeah, so to speak specifically to the closed session items, it's funny, Ms. Decker, that you can talk about what's appropriate and what's not. We're talking about you going into a room right now under the cover of closed session, no cameras, to talk about what Chief Moore recommends regarding the uses of force against Angelenos. And so I think, Zach brought it up, people have brought it up. Even when you find something out of policy, like you did last week with John Penny, nothing's going to happen. There's no accountability because the chief said that it should be in policy. This is all just like a sponge to suck up criticism that should be landing in the lap of the mayor, because all of your incompetence is on him.
Thank you. We have Nick followed by American. Nick, you're on. Okay, we'll come back to Nick. American followed by caller ending in 3146.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Hey, I do want to say, I just want to check the facts on something here. If Chief Moore is the chief of police, please tell me why is it that he can't fire officers? Please tell me that's false. Because if he's the chief of police, I think it's only right that he's able to have that power. It only makes sense. So I'll get back on track. I apologize. Another thing I need to check for understanding is, why is it that the chiefs don't have that power? I mean, that just doesn't make sense to me.
We're going to move on, sir. You're off topic. Let's move on to the next caller, please.
Okay, we have caller ending in 3146, followed by Kyrie L.
Jonathan Foster, I did watch the video on 041-19, and they were shooting down the street. That's out of policy. Do you remember last week you guys were making statements about officers being found out of policy and you were all laughing? You all should be beaten. So this is what the problem is. If the commission's bias plays itself out in a way where there can be no oversight to prosecute the commissioners, then the system is corrupt. Bonner, you're corrupt. You know, you got a little long hair on the left side, which is your right side. I watched the video, miss. They are not allowed to shoot down the street. The officers report misconduct 210.46, what Dale Bonner was talking about. I'm reporting misconduct, and then you in the police commission don't do anything like you're supposed to. The problem is when people complain.
Let's go to our next caller, please. Our next speaker.
Okay, Kyrie dropped off, so we'll move on to T, and then we'll try Nick again.
We're on item number 3.
4. We're on item 4, closed session items.
So you talk about use of force here, but yet I'm going to echo what some other folks had said. Even when officers are found out of policy and there's excessive use of force and LAPD is literally murdering people with impunity and facing no consequence, your chief decides to do absolutely zero. There's zero accountability, even when found out of policy in the case of Grishario Mack. Why is Martin Lee and Martin Robles still on the job?
We're not dealing with that matter today.
Okay, but I'm trying to make a point. Let me finish. I'm trying to make a point. You're going into a closed session item over officers' use of excessive force, right? So why is it that time and time again that your chief doesn't hold any of his officers accountable? When a civilian is murdered, anybody has been murdered out here. 609 people have been murdered in LA by law enforcement, yet you continue to.
Thank you. And okay.
Are you going back to Nick?
I am, but it looks like he dropped off.
Okay.
Oh, let me hold. Oh, there he is. Okay, Nick. Nick, you're on.
Okay, something's not working. Let's move on to the next caller.
Okay. Gina Viola, followed by Sam Sachs.
Hi, so I just have to echo again that I also had my hand raised for public comment, and given how long we've been doing this in this scenario, I think you will attest to the fact that we know how to raise our hands. You are not giving folks enough time. You're going to have to leave that hand open thing throughout public comment, because I raised my hand very quickly and then it disappeared. So it's getting cleared more than once. Closed session. we're in an accountability crisis with policing. You should be hearing nothing in closed session right now. If you truly want to get some public support behind you, you need to start opening things up. Closed session it just shouldn't happen. You guys aren't policing everyone in this city. You're protecting property for the rich, wealthy, white areas, and you're terrorizing Black, brown, and poor people. That's what the LAPD is. Don't go into closed session on anything.
Thank you. Now we have Sam Sachs, followed by Support Moore.
Can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Yeah, I wanted to echo a lot of what the last caller said. I too had my hand raised for general public comment, and you can look at the record. I've called in previous weeks. I know how to use this functioning. Clearly, if this many people are saying that something's going on, something's probably going on. To that same extent, the idea that a commission focused on like oversight and accountability would go into closed session, like the last caller said, during a time when your bias is like being exposed, and at a time when such violence is being exposed. Chief Moore has said things like blood is on the hands of peaceful protesters to minimize the extent of the guilt that's on his hands and the hands of his officers.
Sir,
How can
please-
we trust
please
that
get
his
back to
words
the
and
closed
closed
session items.
comment? How can we trust that this closed session is going to be anything just or anything close to accountability or oversight that you supposedly uphold? Fuck you, Chief Moore. Fuck you, Soboroff.
Thank you. We have Support Moore, followed by MW.
Hello, is it me?
Hi, yes.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, commissioners. I was raising my hand for general, but my name was never called. I'm sorry about that. I will try next week. Sorry.
Thank you. We will look into this, members of the public. I'm not sure what happened. We don't lower anybody's hands during public comment. When the secretary said that there were 15 people in queue, that's what I took to be. So we will look into that if something in fact went wrong, and I apologize to anyone waiting in queue. Madam Secretary, the next person with respect to closed session items.
We have MW, followed by Jan Williams.
So I'm not familiar with the cryptic 3 police officer Roman numeral 2, 1 police officer Roman numeral 1, involving the officer involved shooting of R.R. Gabriel. I don't know what all that code means. I don't know what a non-tactical, unintentional discharge could even begin to describe. Why is there a non-tactical, unintentional discharge with any officer within the LAPD? Much less discussing these clear deaths or woundings of individuals by what appears to be 5 different officers, if I can discern the cryptic dialogue that you all are going to discuss behind closed doors. It's unacceptable. Demand to Mayor Garcetti that Chief Moore is fired. And if you're going to be enablers, you should all.
Thank you. Jan Williams, followed by Clint Blakely.
Okay, so going into closed session to listen to the recommendations of Chief Moore, is that what y'all are doing? We can't trust Chief Moore and his use of force recommendations. Chief Moore allowed his officers to misuse what they call less lethal force against peaceful protesters, and people were severely injured. So we can't trust anything that Moore recommends. I recommend Chief Moore be fired. He's not smart. He's violent. He probably has a gun on him right now. Yeah. I recommend you guys disarm the police. There's no reason why they need to be running around our streets with guns and beating and killing people, beating men in wheelchairs. Like, it's horrible. Do not accept.
Clint Blakely, followed by Ken Barnard.
Hi there. I'm really surprised that I'm finally getting to speak. My hand has been up for hours now, and I raised my hand when you said that we should for public comment. Next time I checked, my hand was lowered. I know, Decker, you can shake your head and have this look of disgust on your face when you say that you don't lower people's hands, but I don't know what to tell you. And I think from all the other folks calling in and saying that their hand was raised and their hand was lowered. We've been calling in for weeks and weeks and weeks. And
if you'd like to address the closed session items, you're free to do so. I already said we would look into what happened.
Yeah. The best thing you can do is actually let us speak on public comment when our hands were raised in the first place. But that's okay. I can speak on closed session. I don't think this closed session should be happening in the first place. I don't think we can trust a damn word that Chief Moore says when he's the man who says that protesters are just as responsible for George Floyd's death as the police that killed him. We need to fire Moore. Justice for Melly Corrado.
Thank you. Ken Barnard, followed by Paul Hennessy.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Hi. Yeah, obviously we had some issues with people's hands being raised lowered. Rather than looking into it, Commissioner Decker, simple solution, let's open up another 30 minutes of public comment. That said, I'd like to speak to the closed session items 1 and 2. I know the board can't verbally answer, but I'd just like to ask one question to each of you. And you can simply nod your head if the answer is yes. Have any of you seen the video of Joshua Wilson, the black man that was thrown out of his wheelchair by LAPD? Okay, so
addressing the closed session items, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me move on to closed session item number 2. People have called for Chief Moore's firing. Why is that something the board isn't even willing to discuss?
Not addressing the closed session
Oh,
item.
I'm sorry.
On to the next speaker. Who's our next speaker?
We have Paul Hennessy, followed by our final speaker, caller ending 3871.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Please proceed.
For the closed session items, I'd like to demand the firing of both officers 041-19 and 044-19. Their actions were both fireable offenses and out of policy. Please hold these officers and the entire LAPD to a higher standard or risk even more corruption within your department. And fire Chief Moore because his recommendations are ill-advised. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Okay, final speaker 3871.
Hi, I am just calling to call for the firing and prosecution of Sinlin Say and Sarah Winans for the killing of Melly Corrado. I know this isn't about—
Those are not the items before us in closed session. If you'd like to address those, you're welcome to.
If y'all can bend the rules, and so can I. I said my piece. I yield my time. Bye.
All right, we'll move it into closed session since that was the last speaker. Madam Secretary.
The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss item agendas 4A1 and 4A2 in accordance with Government Code 54957.
All right, very well. We're back on the record with Mr. Bonner, Mr. Soboroff, the Inspector General, the Board Secretary, and Mr. Teefank, our Executive Director. Would you please do a readout of our closed session?
Yes, Commissioner. As to item 4A1, OIS 041-19, the Commission unanimously adopted the Chief's recommendations on a 3-0 vote. Those recommendations were tactics, tactical debrief, 3 police officer 2, 1 police officer 1, drawing exhibiting in policy, 3 police officer 2, 1 police officer 1, lethal use of force in policy, 2 police officer 2, 1 police officer 1. As it relates to item 4A2, non-tactical unintentional discharge 044-19, the Commission unanimously adopted on a 3-0 vote the recommendations of the Chief of Police. Those recommendations were tactical debrief, 1 police officer 1, drawing and exhibiting does not apply, unintentional discharge, administrative disapproval, negligent discharge, 1 police officer 1. And that concludes the report now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Teefank. I will repeat this next week when we resume our meeting or scheduled meeting next week. But I did ask the Board Secretary and the Executive Director of the Commission to look into the issue of members of the public saying hands were raised and they were not recognized. What appears to have happened, according to at least our initial review, is that it appears that people didn't understand that when I said clear the queue, that all hands were being put down and that we reopened public comment for the next agenda item. In an effort to address that issue so it doesn't happen next week, I will attempt to be clearer next week on the process that we are using. And since some individuals who frequently attend the meetings were having trouble getting in, it's a little curious to me, but nevertheless, because I believe that they know the process very well, but I will endeavor next week to be clear so everybody understands when hands are being lowered, meaning the agenda item has been closed, and when we're reopening the next agenda item. And hopefully that will work and we'll avoid that problem in the future. That said, the only issue remaining on the agenda is to adjourn, and I will move for adjournment. Is there adjournment? Is there a second? Mr. Soboroff, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye, 3-0. We stand adjourned until our next scheduled board meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.